Hi everyone, Michael Anfield here, and thank you for joining me. Please do like this video, or rather podcast, and let me talk to you today about why I don't trust science or religion. Actually, in fact, I was just going to talk about science, but now I want to talk about science and religion. So why I don't trust or why I don't follow science or religion. And the thing is, that's not always true. There are certain scientific studies or there are certain religions that I do follow. Doesn't mean I am part of it or that I fully agree with everything. For the majority of time, I'm talking about institutionalized science and religion. Let me talk about this a little bit. So, this podcast video will be a little lengthy, so bear in mind. Let's first get into religion because I think religion is a little bit easier and faster to deal with or to talk about before we go into the science. So, first thing about religion is that there are, yes, religions like Buddhism and Jainism and maybe Hinduism and a few others that really do talk about peace and love, compassion for others, and so does Christianity. I think it's a part of a bigger picture anyways. I think all religions are part of the same goal, is really to keep people in fear and to program people. Here and there I do take some scriptures and some teachings from these religions like Buddhism and Jainism and so forth, like nonviolence, like ahimsa, and thou shalt not kill, and Ten Commandments, and Genesis 1:29 and Genesis 1:30, and things like that. But in the whole context of it, it's really there to confuse people and to instill fear in them. Now, if you really read for example, the Bible word for word, or if you really take the teachings of Buddhism or Jainism very seriously, you will see that it is really a vegan path is what they're talking about. But don't forget also that these books and these religions are thousands of years old. And so a lot of what they're preaching is obsolete, like when we had to sacrifice and eat animals, or when people justify, for example, consuming dairy or something like that, as in Jainism or Buddhism. And what I feel is that religion is just a mirror of our culture. So if our culture is a herding culture that sees animals as property and food, then the religion will kind of mirror itself to that, even though it may say something different in the holy scriptures. Religions just mirror the culture. Same thing with science, and I'm going to go into science a little bit, and that is that, yeah, there may be some scientific papers and studies out there that do promote plant-based and vegan living, but in the whole scheme of things, it is a mirror of our culture, which is a herding culture. Now, herding, really in a technical sense, means that we take large animals and we put them into large groups. We confine them into large groups, and but in the sense of it, as in Dr. Will Tuttle talks about, as in herderism, is really about seeing non-human animals as property and as food. So if our culture is that, and I mean the world culture, because East, West, all cultures around the world consume animals and animal products. We need to realize that. Because our culture is a herding culture, everything, all the institutions and all the ethics and moralities that we instill in our hearts and that we are taught through our culture is emulated, or is at least basis of our ethics and morality is based on herding animals, on seeing animals as property, as seeing animals as food, as commodities, as things to be used. So we'll never get out of that mentality. We'll never get to a higher levels of consciousness because of the culture. So if our culture, our base of our culture does not change, our ethics does not change, if we don't see other animals in a different way, if we continue seeing animals as property, then science and religion will still continue to be the same. Even though there may be a few things in science and religion that may talk about plant-based eating or vegan living, what tends to happen is, in the whole grand scheme of things, they're both still institutions, part of our herding culture. So nothing will ever get better in a whole scheme of things. Just like in politics, nothing will ever get better because it's based on a herding culture. When we look at life, our culture as a whole, and I don't mean just like, oh, there's a Canadian culture and there's a Indian culture and there's a Chinese culture and there's a South African culture and so forth. When I talk about culture, I'm talking about human culture. I mean, I'm talking about world culture. And world culture is based on consuming animals, based on seeing other animals as property. And when I say other animals, we're all animals. Humans are animals. So what I'm trying to get at here is, in a larger picture, as we talk about religion and science as institutions, I'm not guided by religion or science. When people say, well, it's a scientific fact, or it's this or that, or the Bible says this, or whatever, you got to look at the bigger picture. Generally, most science and most religions are based off of our herding culture. And I'm not talking about religion in a sense of spirituality, some kind of spiritual practice. Like when you're talking about Buddhism, and you're really talking about Buddhism as in the real true definition of Buddhism, which means to not harm and not kill. Because really what Buddhism is all about, the teachings of Buddha. The teachings of Buddha is not to harm and not to kill. So when people are giving themselves the title of I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a Jain, or I'm this, or I'm that, if you don't actually practice a vegan way of eating, or even a fruitarian way of eating, then you're truly not a Jain, or truly not Buddhist. Because the teachers like Buddha and Jesus and so forth, they taught compassion. They taught love for all life. If you really read it and understand and decipher each word and each sentence, you'll see that, yeah, it is a vegan Bible. Jainism and Buddhism, they're vegan. But then again, in the context of institutionalized religions, as in organized religions, they're a part of a bigger picture, which is herding of animals, herding culture. That's why I really don't follow religions and I don't follow science to the most part, because of the fact that they're just part of this herding culture. And the only way we're going to solve any of our problems in this world is if we get down to the core of the issue, which is herding animals. That's what our culture is all about. So if we don't address the underlying cause of our problems, which is herding animals, nothing will get better. And so if we are ever to get out of the mess that we're in today, we have to understand the underlying core problem that we face. The underlying core problem is seeing other animals as property, seeing them as food, and understanding that we live in a herding culture. And ultimately, to solve everything is really to preach the message of love, which is what veganism and fruitarianism is all about. It's sharing this message. And that's all it is unconditional love for all life, trying to cause the least harm that we can. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Share it around with all your friends and family, everyone you can. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you want to get notifications through your email, just click that little bell icon beside the subscribe. And that's really about it, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I love you all. Take care, everyone.